But when I understood it's Yom HaShoah and we'll have the Tzfira at 10 o'clock, I wanted to talk not about halachic questions during the Holocaust, but halachic questions I got in Poland when I was there at Rosh Kollel, 2013 to 2017. I finished smicha and we did a training program with my wife and we went to a shlichut Kollel Torah Mitzion in Walsa. I was a Rosh Kollel there for 4 years. And I thought talking about it today, very interesting questions. Some of the whole community is living Holocaust 365 days a year. I'll explain in a minute why. So I went there, we went there for 4 years. We came with 3 kids. We came back to Israel with 5 kids. Now we're 7 kids. And we had a kollel there, Torah Mitzion, with the chief rabbi of Poland. Let's start. I'll start with a bit of information about Poland Jewry after the war, and then we'll go into the halachic questions. Just a second. Let's share the screen. Okay. Beseder. So we all know about the Holocaust in 1939 to 1945. In Poland, we had between 3 and 3.5 million Jews pre-war, before the war. What happened at the end? 1945, more than 90% of the Polish Jewry was killed, murdered in the Holocaust. However, there were about 300,000, 350,000 Polish Jews that survived the Holocaust. Some of them in Poland, in death camps, in non-Jewish homes, etc. Most of them were ones that ran away to Russia, Siberia, etc., and other countries. And after the war, 1945, they came back to their house, to their home. They came back and they understood that nothing is left. Nothing is left. Most of their family was killed. Most of the Jewish friends were killed, murdered. And most of them decided not to stay in Poland after the Holocaust. However, some did. Meaning from the 300,000, let's say, Jews, most of them flee to other countries. However, we had a few dozens of thousands of Jews that stayed in Poland. Why did they stay in Poland after everything that happened? So first of all, one big thing happened just after 1945, which is Kielce pogrom. Kielce pogrom, 42 Jews were killed by the Polish people, 80 were injured, and that many Jews that came to Poland, stayed in Poland a few months, were debating what to do. That helped them to decide, we don't want to stay here. If 1948, Medinat Israel was established, between the years 49 and 51, 28,000 Jews came to Israel. Afterwards, Polish was under the Iron Dome, was communist under Russia, and Gomulka immigration, 1956 to 1960, 35,000 Jews were allowed to go to Israel. They took their Polish passport, and many important so-called people left Poland there. And the last thing, 1968, after the 6-Day War, Poland, which was communist, as I said before, like the rest of the other Soviet countries, this stopped the connections, diplomatic connection with Israel. And there were spontaneous demonstrations. Here it's in Polish, but Poland for Poles and Palestine for Jews. If you were a Jew and you were in the government, university, in the media, you were fired from your job, and many Jews left some to Israel, many to Scandinavia, to other countries, and basically the bit of Jewish life that was after the war pretty much finished. After 1968, there were no schools, no active synagogues, no mikvaot, only one Jewish organization called the Tais Kajed, like a communist organization. That's the only organization, but basically we didn't have any Polish Jewish life. However, there were many Jews that stayed. Why should you stay in Poland after the Holocaust, after Kielce, and after all of these things? I think the answer is complicated, but many Jews after the Holocaust decided they don't want to do it to their siblings and children. So they decided to take a different identity and not to tell their spouse, the new spouse, that they're Jews, not to tell their children that they're Jews. And then they hoped that they can keep on living as Poles. And that's what they did until 1989, and I'll say that, as I'll explain in a second. Meaning, Jews that stayed in Poland decided that they don't want to be Jews anymore. The Poles, the communists, they're not acting as Jews. Until 1989. 1989, after the Iron Dome fell, and the Iron Curtain fell, and it was allowed to say, I'm a Jew. And slowly, people came back to being Jewish. So our community in Poland, I say our community because I feel connected, the Jewish community in Poland that started in 1989 had no tradition. Meaning, when I was a rabbi in the synagogue and somebody told me, Rabbi, our tradition in the synagogue is ABC, I laughed. Because what do you mean it's our tradition? The tradition of the first rabbi that came in 1989, Rabbi Yoskovich, so, that's a tradition. It's not a tradition of other communities. You have decades and centuries of Masoret, that's what you did. So there was no tradition. And for the people that did come to the community, and not the Holocaust survivors, but the next generations, are people that came without any Jewish identity, any Masoret. They had to start everything from zero, which what brought many, many questions, and as I will discuss in a minute. Let's see a few more pictures. This is the Walsa view. I want to talk a bit about this family. On the left, you can see the grandmother. And the grandmother was a Holocaust survivor. She came from a Hasidic family, and her parents in the ghetto gave her to a Christian friend, and she survived the Holocaust. The only thing that she knew
we don't see the pictures.
You cannot see them?
No.
We're seeing the synagogue.
Okay, it happened again. So thank you for telling me.
Your PowerPoint is not moving.
Wait. Thank you. Now can you see the family? No?
I still just see the shul.
No.
Okay, just a minute.
There.
Sorry.
Yes.
There.
Now you can see it?
Well, we see a bunch of people in front of an Aron Kodesh.
Okay, that's it. Okay. Wait, now you can see them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So on the left, you can see this is a family that did a bar mitzvah in the synagogue, a Jewish family. When I was a rabbi there, on the left, you see the grandmother, Barbara. She was a Holocaust survivor, as I said. All she knew is a name that her parents wrote on a piece of paper when they gave her to the Christian family. And she grew up as a Christian. And when she was 10 years old, she asked her mother, Mother, how come you're 50 years older than me? It's strange. And her mother didn't say anything. And after a few years, she came to her again. How come I don't look like you? Could be that I'm half Jewish. So the adopting mother said, no, you're not half Jewish, you're Jewish, both sides. And this Holocaust survivor, Barbara, didn't do anything with this information. She knew she's Jewish. She didn't do anything until she got married, and her 3 daughters got married as well. When her daughter Bogna, here on the left, next to her with the orange, yellow, whatever blouse, when she got married and all 3 daughters got married, she told them, listen, I didn't tell you till now. Now, after you're married, it's safe to tell you, I'm Jewish and you're Jewish. Good luck. What does a person that is, 25 years old, 30 years old, married, brought up as a Christian Pole, does with this information that he's Jewish? If I would be told, listen, Moshe, you're not Jewish, you're the Hindu. That's your real, what will I do with it? What to do? Many Jews decide to hear it and to keep on with their life. Bogna decided that she wants to be Jewish. She started looking she lived in Lublin, she looked into archives and learned about Jewish things. They decided to move from Lublin to Walsa, because Walsa we have a Jewish school. And she started coming to synagogue from time to time. Her kids didn't come at the beginning, then slowly they came. Her husband is Christian, but he's very tolerant. We call him Jewish friendly. He's Jewish friendly, he's a nice guy. And she comes to synagogue from time to time. And when the kids, the kshish, the son was bar mitzvah, so, we bar mitzvah, we do bar mitzvah. So he didn't read the Torah, but he learned a bit to go up to the Torah. And we have to do a birthday, a bar mitzvah cake. But the house is not kosher. So she came to our house to bake for the kiddush, for the bar mitzvah cakes, because she knew her house is not kosher, but she wanted to do something. She was very into Jewish things. And we were debating, me and my wife, how much to teach her. Because we knew if we teach her too much, she won't be able to fulfill it. And we were really debating many times. Her husband is not going to do conversion. He's very nice. For him, his wife is Jewish, just like he goes to he has a club, a basketball club once a week. Okay, you go there, it's nice, okay. So she's going to synagogue for Friday night and from time to time and Chagim. But we felt if she will be too serious, what will happen to the family? So again, we let people choose, but it's a very delicate situation. She wanted to make aliyah, her husband didn't want. So it was very, very delicate. And we tried to be there for them, for her, but to understand the very, very complex situation. I want, the first question I want to talk about is from Valerie. You can see this picture, right, of the family reading. Can you see it?
No, we're still seeing just the family.
Now you can see the family reading? Yes, okay. So here we have a girl named Valerie. She went to Taglit and became very Jewish oriented. And she started coming to Jewish things, Friday night ceremonies, tefillot. And then she came to me one day and called me, Rabbi, listen, I have a problem. What is the problem? I broke my foot and the doctors tell me I have to eat Sidan. No, what's Sidan in English?
Calcium.
Calcium, thank you. And I'm trying to keep kashrut. And I know that there's a problem because I want to eat gelatin. And I know that gelatin has a lot of calcium, but I know it's problematic with kashrut. What can I do? That's the question. Now, gelatin, not kosher gelatin, and even in the past, kosher gelatin was made from bones and skin of dry animals. Many of them are, of course, not kosher, and as well pig, pork. And how is it made? You take the bones, you crush them, you dry them, you make powder, and from the powder you use what's called E441, which is you use it for many things, for creams, for mousse, for chocolate, and many things. And about 150 years ago, there was a long discussion. Can you make it? Is it allowed to eat gelatin from pigs? Why? Because some of the rabbis, like the Achiezer of Gojensky and the Hartzvi and others, said, just a minute, this came from an animal, from a bone of a non-kosher animal, correct? But once it's dried and a powder, and now use the powder, that's what's called in halacha, panim chadashot ba'u lekan. We have a new face came here. It's something else. It's not the same thing. And that's why you're allowed to use it. Till a few years ago, maybe even till today, some of the kashrut organizations in the world still allow gelatin from non-kosher animals, because as not as mehadrin, but as kosher, regular kosher, because of this kula of the Hartzvi and others, because it's panim chadashot ba'u lekan. It came from a non-kosher animal, but it transformed and it's something else now, and it came from the bone and not from the meat, which is another kula. That's according to the more lenient opinions. Today, most gelatin, the mehadrin gelatin, is from gelatin from fish and from other things that are let's say mehadrin, and they are used. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, it's a machloket, she has it's for medical use. I didn't think it's a problem for her to use regular gelatin. But then I came to her and asked her, Valerie, you asked me about gelatin. Do you keep kosher? And she told me, I try. So I told her, but when you eat at home by your parents, your mother is making food, do you eat what she makes? Now, I knew the parents don't keep kosher. So she told me, yes, what can I do? I eat at home. And I asked them, Valeria, when your mother makes meat, do you eat it? And she said, yes. Now, I knew the meat is not kosher because I knew all the people that buy kosher meat in the community. So she asked me about gelatin, but she eats treif meat at home. And I'm like, what's going on here? So I told her, listen, Valerie, next time maybe talk to your mother and tell her that, calmly, sometime we all calm and good situation, good environment. Tell her that you're trying to keep kashrut, and you're asking if next time, if it's okay that she won't eat at least the meat that you're making, that the mother is making, and ask the mother if it's okay that from now on she won't eat the not kosher meat. Maybe she will eat other things, but at least the not kosher meat not to eat. And the gelatin, of course, there's no problem, you can eat. And I saw on her face that it was a good answer. The irony thing here is that Valerie is not Jewish at all. She is not halachically Jewish because her father is Jewish, but her mother is not Jewish. But for her, and in Poland, she's Jewish. And this is a different aspect that we heard, I think people heard about Russian Jewry, but we had it in Poland as well. In Poland, like in all communist places, we know halacha, you're Jewish by the mother, but many people, if their father is Jewish, they felt Jewish. Not only that according to the law in Israel, so as we know, you can make aliyah if your grandfather is Jewish. So people said, just a minute, if for the state of Israel, the Jewish state, I'm Jewish enough because my father was Jewish, for the Jewish community of Walsa, kal v'chomer. So in Poland, being a member of a community is according to Chok HaShvut, meaning if you had a Jewish grandfather, you're allowed to be a member of the Jewish community. Doesn't mean you're halachically Jewish. And people knew that they're not halachically Jewish, but they were part of the Jewish community. And Valerie was one of them. Now, whoever came to us, the rabbis, we told them, listen, you have to do conversion if you want to be, proper Jews. Only a Jewish father. You're not Jewish halachically, but for them, they felt Jewish. And more than that, I met one of the seniors, and he told me, listen, you see me and the man next to me? I'm Jewish and he's not. But you think that he's Jewish and I'm not. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, my father is Jewish and my family name is Yakubovich. So all the people in Poland, they know I'm a Jew. But my friend, his mother is Jewish, but his father is Polish, Christian, whatever. So his family name is not Jewish. So nobody knows he's Jewish. People don't see him as a Jew, even though for you, for the rabbi, in synagogue, you can give him an aliyah, and for me not. So to be a rabbi in such a community arises many, many halachic questions. How to treat not halachic Jews, but they have Jewish roots and they want to be part. Can we allow them in the synagogue? Somebody that has a Jewish father, will he be allowed to come in the synagogue? Our answer is yes. Will we welcome him to the synagogue? The answer is yes. Will we give him an aliyah in the synagogue? Definitely not. He's not halachically Jewish. Can we count into the minyan? Definitely not. And we'll tell him that. And you all understand. You count people, and you see, okay, he understands he's not part. Will his daughter do a bat mitzvah in synagogue? No. If she's not halachically Jewish, but we will do maybe something not bat mitzvah, but something else that will be different than the bat mitzvah, because bat mitzvah is only for Jews, of course, bar mitzvah, but something, yes, to acknowledge this person becoming 12 or 13. So for us, it was a very difficult job. I had friends with Torah Mitzion in the States and other places. I said, your job is so easy. If he's Jewish, he's Jewish. If he's not, he's not. For us in Poland, it was very complicated. It was very, very complicated. And if we will say only Jews are allowed, so if somebody that his father is Jewish, he came to synagogue, so his Jewish father came. If we will tell, if you're not halach Jewish, you're not accepted, so also the Jewish people won't come because they come with their family. So this was a very complex situation. Questions till now? Okay.
Yeah, I have one question on this.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, we're following the, as you say, when you say the halachic definition, we're going according to the Orthodox stream. But, the Reform or conservative stream would accept them. Do they exist in Poland where they say, come to us and we will do that? I mean, that's an issue here that's half in Israel of what power they have here. And in the States, they definitely would allow them to do these things. So the question is, what status do they have in Poland?
Okay. So in Poland, we have a Reform community, and we have even two Reform communities that are fighting with each other. And they have two Reform. One is Reform very, very, the Jewish level there is very, very low, let's say. And the other Reform synagogue are more serious, the Reform, but more serious, meaning if you're a Reform man, sorry, if you're a Jew that married a non-Jew, they won't, or the opposite, a Jewish woman that married a Goy, and he would want to be given aliyah to the Torah in the Reform shul, they would not allow him. They would not allow him. They will say, listen, it's not that you're not accepted. You're accepted, but you're not counting to minyan. Meaning, men and women are counting that to minyan, but only if they're Jews. They would not count to minyan or give an aliyah to non-Jews. However, their conversion process is much easier than ours. Meaning, when we had a non-Jew coming to conversion, so we had our Orthodox conversion. You come, the process is at least 2 years. You have to study we had 4 hours a week, 2 hours on Sunday morning, 2 hours on Wednesday evening, and you have to come to synagogue on Shabbat, and you have to keep kosher, and you have to do chagi, you have to be Orthodox. Again, we understand we're not in Brooklyn, but you have to keep mitzvot. And after 2 years, if somebody is serious, we did with London Beit Din usually, and we had a conversion process. The alternative, it's not an alternative, but for people, I said, okay, what's my other option? The Reform is much easier. You come for a year, you have 2 classes a week, and you have to be to go according to the Reform standards, which are, as we all understand, much lower. Keeping kashrut is much easier. Let's say they kept kashrut, meaning they didn't eat not kosher meat, and that's all. That's keeping kosher for them. No meat at all, so you don't have meat and milk, and no, nevelot v'trafot, and no, of course, the fish, the not kosher fish, shrimps, etc. But that's all. No other restrictions. So it was much easier to do a conversion in the Reform synagogue. So they had more people coming to them, and then it was easier to have a minyan for them because they could convert people much faster. You have a few people that did the Reform conversion, then came to us. So that's pretty much my answer. Phil, did I answer you?
Just one more question.
Yes, Phil?
Phil, you're on mute. You're muted yourself.
Sorry, I thought I unmuted. Okay, now I'm unmuted?
Yes.
Okay. I thought the question, part of it is obviously the husband is a goy. And I mean, that's an issue. If the husband's a goy, it's one thing. Or if she's a goy, it's one thing. But according to the Reform situation, they'll go by the patrilineal. So the question is, you say there won't be an aliyah for that person, but would there be an aliyah according to the Reform for the son? Because will son be considered Jewish if you can go by one of the two parents? No,
in the Reform, and I'm not a big bucky in the Reform movement in the States, but in Poland, the Reform rabbi, so-called, he decided that, I don't know, I thought it's mostly from synagogues, whatever. If the mother is not Jewish, the kids are not Jewish, and they cannot be called to the Torah, and they're not considered Jews until they will do a conversion. A Reform conversion, but a conversion.
You mean even if the father was Jewish?
Correct.
Correct. He would consider his children not Jewish?
Correct.
Because of them. But that, again, that certainly in the United States, as Phil was saying, if the father's Jewish, then they accept that the kids are Jewish.
So again, the Reform rabbi, I said there are two Reform synagogues. So the more Orthodox one, the Reform rabbi, there is more strict in other things as well. That's what they did, and that's what they did in Poland, and that's what they're still doing. That's what I know. I left there 4.5 years ago, so that's what they did at least till I left. What happens in other places? Maybe you're right. Not in the Reform Etz Chaim synagogue in Poland. Any more questions? Yalla. Okay. Let's see a few things here. Okay, let's do that. This is me. Okay, this is a very interesting family. A couple that were neo-Nazim. And before they got married, they both found out that they're from Jewish families, both. And there were a few films about them and articles, and they became, extreme people. So he became the shochet of the community, and with a long beard and the long story. But they were one of the first, I would say, Jewish families, a neo-Nazi couple that found out before wedding that both are Jews. It was very, very interesting story. He's still doing kosher business in Poland. This is the Nordic Synagogue. If you go to Poland, you have to come there. The only pre-war synagogue still existing, and still the tefillot are there. The Nazis destroyed all the synagogues, of course, besides this that they used as a stable. The Nazis used it as a stable for the horses. That's how it survived. This is the inside. This is our Sunday and Wednesday Beit Midrash for Jews and non-Jews. Meaning, if this was originally for Gerim, but then Jewish people came to me and said, listen, Rabbi, we want to study as well. We have no lectures. We have 4 lectures a week, but we don't know much more than the people that are in conversion process. So we opened it for Jews and non-Jews, the Sunday and Wednesday. This is our Kollel Torah Mitzion. We had a small Kollel and in the Bet Midrash. We have here somebody on the left, Israeli, that met a Polish girl. She did conversion, and he did tshuva, and he lived in Walsa for a few years until they came on Aliyah. We see here a person that his father met a Jewish, his father came to Poland, whatever, he was born there and he was raised Jewish and did conversion after bar mitzvah. We have another person that found out his grandfather is Jewish, did conversion, and mamash, one of the religious families. Lev, another Jew, born Jew, came on Na'aleh to Israel, and now he's married in Poland, religious. And another Israeli that came to Poland many years ago to work. More people. Sunday school.
What language did you teach them in?
English. I tried to study Polish, a very, very complicated language. I was told it's second in the world after Chinese. It's the second complicated. And the truth is, my wife didn't want us to stay there for so many years. And she didn't like me learning Polish because she knew if I learned Polish, our chances to stay there are higher. So it was one of the things that made us come back relatively quick after 4 years, that she didn't learn any Polish and I didn't, I understood a bit. I understood when people were talking, I understood, 80% of what they said. But to speak it was too difficult. So English translation to Polish. If you have never done it and you're coming to give a shiur with a translation, it's very difficult and you understand the Gemara. The Gemara talks about a metargim. The rabbi would say, the speech or a sentence, and then the metargim would say it out loud. it's very, very strange. You say a sentence and then you have 30 seconds of looking at people. And, you know, when the translation, it's very difficult to give a shiur, but it has its benefits as well. You have time to think. You can see look at the people. But yes, to give a drasha English and Polish was difficult. In the kollel, everybody spoke English. So it was in English, but drashot, it was sentence and sentence translation, very complicated. Sunday school for Jewish Israeli kids, a few families. So we had Sunday school. Okay, so let's skip this. I'm debating. Okay, skip this. Okay. We have here very complicated question I was asked. On the top on the left, you can see it, right? On the top of the left, wedding. Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so you see here Sheva brachot we had in Poland for a Jewish Israeli Kohen guy that married with a Polish Jewish woman, Chana. They met, whatever, they did a wedding in Israel, but they came for a Sheva brachot in Poland. And they're living in Poland till today. The interesting question here, he's a Kohen and she's Jewish born. However, her mother is Jewish, but her father is not Jewish. Again, we have here a woman that her father is not Jewish and she wants to marry a Kohen. Can she do such a thing? Whoever was studying Daf Yomi in the past 2 weeks, the Gemara is exactly talking about this issue. Oved Kochavim Abal Bat Israel. Havalad Kasher, Havalad Mamzer, Havalad Pasud Lekiyuna, meaning a non-Jew that married a Jewish woman and they have a girl, a daughter. Can she marry a Kohen? There's a long discussion about it. Excuse me? Phil, you're unmuted. Phil Servinsky. Okay, so we have a long discussion. I was asked this question, and at the end they got married, but it was a very big discussion, and I'll explain. There are 3 opinions in the Rishonim. Can such a woman that her father not Jewish marry a Kohen? The Rambam says it's allowed. You're allowed to do it lechatchila. Many Rishonim say she's pasul lekehuna, meaning just like a convert or a divorcee cannot marry a Kohen. So also somebody that her father is non-Jewish, she cannot marry a Kohen. That's what the Gemara says, pagum lekehuna, meaning she's not allowed to marry a Kohen. The Shulchan Aruch writes that you're not allowed to marry them. However, the Achronim say that im niset lo tetzeh, meaning if they were already married, so you don't have to separate them. Why? The Achronim say because of that Rambam. The Rambam allows them to get married. So if they were already married, so you don't have. It's not like a divorcee with a Kohen, which is Isur Torah. So that even after they were married, halachically, you're supposed to separate them. Of course, theoretically, if you can. But halachically, they're not supposed to stay together. However, in such a case, which is only pasul midrabanan, there's a machloket, so if they got married, you don't have to separate them. The Achronim, in the last 100 years, they expand this heter that even if they decided to get married, what's the poskim say, niksheru be'avotot shel ahava, so you don't have to separate them. Meaning, not only after the marriage, but if they decided to get married, so that's already considered as a b'di'evid, and you're allowed to marry them because you're somech on dat Rambam. And that I didn't paskin here. They were married in Israel, but the Rabbanut in Israel, in most cases, they check. And if the couple is already decided to get married, especially if the husband is, is not a religious person, and, in a later age like them, after years, they look for a Jewish spouse. So the Rabbanut allowed them to get married, and they got married in Israel, even though, it's not glat, what we say, it's not chalak, it's not, but that's the main halacha. And he asked me his kids can be kohanim, and in their case, it's the best thing. And for a Jewish woman to find a Jewish husband in Poland is a very, very complicated thing. She looked for years to find a Jewish husband, and once they did, we went according to halacha, but we allowed such a wedding. It was one of the happiest weddings I was in Poland. Okay.
We have the siren. We have the siren in a minute.
Yes. So will we stop here and wait for the siren?
That makes sense.
Yeah, because it's 1 minute.
Okay, so again, Sifrei Torah. I was asked half a year after I came to Poland. The Rabbi comes to me, "Come, Rabbi, I want to show you something." Takes a key from the guard, opens something under the Aron Kodesh, and shows me dozens and dozens of gvilim, of scrolls of Sifrei Torah. Small, big, not whole ones, the whole Sefer Torah, but a few parashot, little pieces, some with stains, red stains, torn, all kinds of pieces. And I almost fainted, first time I saw it. And I asked, "What is this?" And he told me, something that happened to me a few months later. I sit in my office, the guard calls me, said, "Rabbi, there's somebody here for you." Who? Nobody called. Okay, I'm going down. And a Polish person says, "Okay, are you the rabbi?" In Polish. I said, "Tak," yes, in Polish. She said, "Here, this is yours." And she gives me a bag. And before I understand what's happening, she's running out. She's going out. Said, wait, what is it? No. She went. I open it, and I see a few scrolls of Sifrei Torah. A few parchments, a few klafim. And from 1945 and on, we had, of course, thousands of Sifrei Torah in Poland. Many of them were burned, but some were there in Poland. And there were many of them by Poles. And many, many Poles during the years that wanted to bring it back, they brought it to the synagogue. And what do people do with it? They didn't know what to do with it, so they put it under the Aron Kodesh. So when I got there, it was full of gvilim, and I had to decide what to do with it. What is the halacha about scrolls, old scrolls of Sifrei Torah that you cannot use? They're very old, stained, torn. What do you do with them? So before I started that, I brought an expert to examine all the klafim, and he took pictures of the more interesting ones, all kinds of klafim that had special ways of writing it, pei melu pefet, and all kinds of things I never heard of. Old ones, this is 100 years old, this is 150 years old, this is more, we took pictures and everything. And we saved a few of the nicest ones, and maybe to use to show in a museum or to use it in the future. And all the rest we decided to do what the halacha it tells us. The Gemara in Megillah Kafar tells us, Ve'amar Rava, Sefer Torah shebala, gonzim oto etzel talmid chacham. I'm going to stop sharing. Sefer Torah shebala, גונזים אותו אצל תלמיד חכם ואפילו שונה הלכות. אמר רב אחא בר יעקב, ובכלי חרס, שנאמר ונתתם בכלי חרס למען יעמדו ימים רבים. הספר תורה that you cannot use, you put him for gniza next to a תלמיד חכם, and רב אחא says, in a כלי חרס, because in Yirmiyahu was told by the Navi, by God, to take the book and to put it in a kli cheres, leman yamdu yamim rabim, Yirmiyahu lamed bet. So the Gemara understood from here, so regular gniza, you bury. But gniza of a Sefer Torah, A, you put next to a Talmid Chacham, B, you put in a kli cheres, in a clay vessel. That's what the Rambam and Shulchan Aruch writes. That's what they write. Okay. So I say, okay, we need two things. We need clay cheres. So that I thought of bringing from Israel. And then I understood it's not practical. So we ordered two big clay vessels from somebody there. They made it for us. And as you saw in the picture, that's what we used. So that was easy. Clay cheres. The second thing we said, okay, we need a Talmid Chacham, meaning a grave of a Talmid Chacham. Are there any graves of Talmidei Chachamim in Walsa? Of course there are. In Walsa, we have the Jewish cemetery. The Jewish cemetery, Okopova Cemetery, that has, I don't know, maybe 50 big known rabbis there. And for me, okay, what do we have to do now? All we have to do is to find a grave of a rabbi, and next to it to put the klei cheres. That's what we have to do. Sounds easy. But it wasn't so easy. This is a Jewish cemetery in Warsaw, Kopova, and I went with the head of the cemetery, and we went kever by kever, and we looked for a free space next to it, and we did not find. Why? Because next to big rabbanim, many people wanted to be buried in the last 200, 100, 200, 300 years. So we did not find one empty space next to a kever Talmid Chacham in order to bury the bones there. Now we were very afraid because whoever, at least in Poland and in other places as well, there are all kinds of movements of the ground. And if you start digging, accidentally could be you will get to a grave or to bones of the grave that 2 meters next to it, but it moved underground. So, and we did not want to do that, to lechalel bones and graves of rabbis or other people. So I checked again in Halacha. The Marcheshet, Rav Chanuch Aigish, was Dayan in Vilna. He was murdered in the Holocaust. Said that what the Gemara says, you should bury them next to a Talmid Chacham, it's not because of the Torah, it's because of the Talmid Chacham. Meaning, if you want to give a kavod to the Talmid Chacham, so bury the Sifrei Torah next to him. But it's not an obligation, a chiyuv, to bury the Sifrei Torah next to a Talmid Chacham. What Rava said, that if you want to bury him next to someone, don't bury him next to Amaretz. That's not a kavod. But if you want to bury him next to someone, next to the Talmid Chacham, but you don't have to. If you want to bury him elsewhere, you're allowed to do it. And Gesher Achaim Rav Yechiel Michel Tikuchinsky wrote in his book that the minhag in Eretz Israel before the war was every 3 years to collect all the old Sifrei Torah and bury them in one of the caves next to Har HaZeitim or Har Tzion. Every 3 years in Israel, the minhag was to collect all the old Gvilim, the Sifrei Torah, and to bury them in one of the caves, in Har Tzion or Har HaZeitim, and that Tzitz Eliezer of Woldenberg wrote the same, meaning we don't have to bury it next to a Talmid Chacham, just we have to find a free space. And that was a big problem. Where can we find a free space in Warsaw that is not next to other graves? And then the chief rabbi had a great idea. At the entrance to the synagogue, to the cemetery in Poland, in Warsaw, there was a place they buried a few years ago bones of Holocaust people that were murdered in the Holocaust. bone that they found from the ghetto. They found like 20 years ago bones in the ghetto of Jews. So they buried them in a separate place in the entrance to the synagogue. So Rav Shurich said, okay, these Kedoshim that died in Kiddush Hashem during the Holocaust, this is a kavod, meaning this is a kavod to show that the Torah keeps on learned by us, by Jewish people, by rabbis, by the Jewish community after the war, after what happens. That is a kavod, even though probably they weren't Talmidei Chachamim, but still they were Kedoshim and Kiddush Hashem. And we decided to bury the Sifter Torah, not exactly there, but in the area of those bones of Kedoshim. And we did it on the Holocaust day, on the, I think the 27th of January or April, I don't remember which one of them, but one of the Polish European days for Yom HaShoah. And after the big ceremony next to in the Walsa ghetto, the big ceremony, many people came with us to this ceremony to bury the Sefer Torah there. And many people came, and a lot of media. It was a very meaningful thing for people to come to see Sefer Torah buried in the Jewish cemetery, explaining to them that just like a soul of a Jew is kadosh, is holy, so Sefer Torah is holy, even though it's not something only physical, it's something spiritual. And we Jews treat even our Sefer Torah scrolls similar to people, to bodies, and we respect them by burying them. And it was a very big thing about 5 years ago in Walsa, Poland. And that's what we did, our answer. And I'll just say there is a custom that Sefer Hasidim brings, that if you have a pasul sefer, even though you can't use it, so there is a custom to leave it in the Aron Kodesh, but to make sure people know it's pasul by putting the belt on the outer part of the Sefer Torah, and then you can to leave it there for, I don't know, for Simchat Torah or for other things. So many synagogues I saw such a thing, that the belt was outside. Sometimes it was Sefer Torah that waited to be fixed, and sometimes it's Sefer Torah that they knew they wouldn't fix. But the main psak is, if you know you cannot fix it, so you should bury it in the way I just said. I want to add one thing. I was asked, can they take some scrolls to a museum? Can you take Torah scrolls and have it in a display in a museum? This is a halachic question. Reb Moshe Feinstein was asked, Rav Kook was asked, because you're supposed to bury it. However, Rav Moshe Feinstein allowed to show Sefer Torah in a museum if it's a Sefer Torah Pasul, and it's for educational reasons. You want to teach Jews or non-Jews about Judaism, and he allowed to leave their a Torah scroll, and that's what we didn't do it in the community, but there were other organizations that did it, and we allowed them. That's the second thing. And the third thing is, do we have to buy old Sefer Torah from Poles? Meaning, in one of the shops in Walsa, I was called there, and I saw on display Sefer Torah that was about half of a Sefer Torah for 10,000 zlotys. $3,000, they sold half a Sefer Torah, I would say. And as well, they had inside a whole Sefer Torah, which was 42,000 zlotys, about, I don't know, $15,000. And we were debating, do we have an halachic obligation to do like Pidyon Shvuim, to buy the Sefer Torah and to bury it or to fix it? Do we have such an obligation to pay money, relatively a lot of money in Poland, in order to bring these old Sifrei Torah back to Jewish hands. And we had a big debate about it in Poland. And at the end, we decided that we do not have to. And we didn't do so. Meaning, if somebody would come to me and say, Rabbi, I want the Sefer Torah, it shouldn't be in Polish hands, it's ours, it's in display, in an antique shop, every person that now will buy it, it's not appropriate, it should come back to us. I'm giving you the money and buy it for me. So I would do it. But an obligation to do so, I do not think there's an obligation to do such a thing. And we did not buy a Sifrei Torah, even though there were other Jewish organizations that decided it's an important thing. I didn't think there's a halachic responsibility to buy them. Questions till now?
Yes, I have a question. That picture of the cemetery,
yes,
is very interesting. It looks like a lot of the matzevas are quite well preserved. But you mentioned about the ground shifting periodically, and you don't really know, let's say, what's underneath. Which interestingly, in Prague, I don't know if you've been there, but the cemetery in Prague there, they say there are literally hundreds of thousands of graves because they're buried one on top of the other, multiple levels that go way down and down and down. Is that the same thing in Poland here? It doesn't look like it.
No.
It's not.
Very
it's
large.
not. I know in Prague, I think when I was there, they said 7 layers, one on top of the other. There's halachic discussions about that as well. Basically, it's allowed if you have a 6 tefachim between graves. Even in Israel, they started doing it, what's called kvurat zug. In Israel today, you can buy, if you want, you can be buried above or under your wife. So they bury one, go down, 2 meters and bury the first spouse. And then after, and leave above it a place for the spouse. And after 120 is buried there, and then you save room. And even it's known that many places today in Israel start to do what's called kvurat komot, lays one on top of the other. It's a whole halakhic discussion. I didn't prepare it, but how is it allowed and why? Basically, it's allowed 100%. Many people don't like it. They want the traditional burial, but it's 100% allowed. In Poland, however, just a second. To as much of my knowledge, in the Walsa cemetery, I think there were more than 100,000 people buried. They did not bury them one on top of the other. And they all had each one a grave. The cemetery is very big. Prague cemetery is relatively small, from what I remember. The Jewish cemetery in Walsa, Okopova, is very big. It can take you half an hour from one side to the other side.
Marcel, you're not on mute. There's somebody. Marcel, please mute yourself.
Okay. I muted them. So, but what I said is about the bones. You can have 2 people buried one next to the other, and this person's bones went under the other one, and it's already mixed. Of course, nobody opens it, and now it starts to look at it. But if we would do so, and I was told in the past, there were all kinds of special cases, and they found bones a few meters aside from the original place because of these underground movements. So that's what they said, but one on top of the other, I do not think so. Harold, did I answer you?
Yes, you did.
Okay, last question, the last 10 minutes, about Jewish ruins of synagogues. What do you do with old ruined synagogue that you cannot use it for anything. To fix it costs millions, and after it will be a synagogue, nobody will use it because it's somewhere there in a small town. No Jew lives in 100 kilometers. Nobody comes to visit. And the question was and is what to do. Now, the Polish law, this is very relevant because it changed. There were a lot of politics between Israel and Poland, but basically the Polish law after the war, all the Polish properties, Jewish properties that were communal, came back to the local Jewish community, meaning synagogues, cemeteries, mikvaot, Jewish hospitals, Jewish schools, old Jewish age homes that the community can show that they were Jewish owned before the war. They came back to the Jewish community. Of course, the thing that the Polish government was happy to get rid of, so-called, is the Jewish cemeteries, because you can't do anything with it. Nobody would move them. That's the first thing. But the communities got as well all kinds of old ruined buildings of synagogues. Now, the communities are small and they have nothing to do with a synagogue 50 kilometers aside. And the question came to the chief rabbi of Poland, which I helped him: can you sell a ruin of a synagogue? You have a synagogue, you don't have just to take care of a synagogue costs a lot of money, because you have to make sure it's not ruined, it won't fall down, and all kinds of taxes you have to pay on the property, etc. And that there's no big Jewish community. You asked in the world if there are Jewish organizations that want to put a few good millions of dollars in order to renovate it, and nobody wanted, and to rebuild it. So what do you do with it? In some places, the communities with other organizations, they made it a local Jewish museum. And then there was a Jewish museum. Usually the local city, the town, they were in charge of the museum. But the Jewish museum was inside the synagogue. And we saw it as a very good solution, because then people use the synagogue in a respected way and for Jewish things, even though, of course, it's not prayer, it's not a synagogue, but that was a good solution. But in many places, it wasn't relevant. And the question is, are you allowed to sell it? This is a very complex halachic issue and very emotional as well, especially if your grandfather davened in that synagogue. If you are third generation and second, and that your grandfather davened in this city, in this synagogue, and you heard that the community sold the synagogue, many people called me shouting at me on the phone, how did the communities done it? And I read them the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch says that Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, מוכרים בית הכנסת וכן שאר דברים שבקדושה להספקת תלמידים או להשיא יתומים בדמם. You can sell synagogue and other things, even a Sefer Torah, if you want money for students or to marry off orphans. And then the Gemara says that אם מכרו זין טובי העיר במעמד אנשי העיר, if the 7 representatives of the city sold the synagogue and it was approved by the city council, let's say, רשאים להוציא המעות לכל מה שירצו. Meaning, the money, they can use whatever they want. And the Gemara says, even to buy shechar, even to buy beer, the community, if they have, the representatives, etc., and they were approved, they can sell a synagogue, even to drink beer, of course. We didn't do that, but we allowed Jewish synagogues to be sold in cases that we saw there's no other option. But the money was given to protect the other Jewish things around, especially the cemeteries. Meaning, we told the community, you can sell an old synagogue, but you have to use that money not to buy beer, but to preserve the cemeteries, and for Jewish maintenance, meaning for the school or for kosher food, etc. That was a psak of the Rabbi of Poland with a committee from England that were dealing with Jewish cemeteries. That's what we did. That was a psak there. I want to finish. You see, we're almost finished with the Minchat Chinuch. The Minchat Chinuch says there's a mitzvah of Hashavat Aveda. If you see a Jew that lost, I don't know, a wallet, a coat, something, you have a responsibility to have a tircha, to look for him, and to give it back to him. The Minchat Chinuch says, if there's such an obligation for physical things, there's the same obligation for spiritual, I would say, Jewish life. If you, the Minchat Chinuch says, you have the possibility to give somebody a Jewish life, Jewish spiritual life, so that's a kal v'chomer from Hashavat Aveda that there's a mitzvah to do it. And I felt in Poland, our work as rabbis was exactly that, Hashavat Aveda. Because these people in Poland today are grandchildren of the Holocaust survivors. And they didn't know anything about Jewish values because of what they decided. It's only because of their grandparents that decided not to tell their kids they're Jewish. So the third generation is now back to being Jewish and without knowing anything about it. And we felt our responsibility as rabbis and as Jews in the world as well, to help these people, to bring them back, to teach them as much as we can, to help them keep mitzvot, some of them to help them to become fully Jewish, to do conversion, Orthodox conversion, and to do this kal v'chomer from Hashavat Aveda. And I think on the Yom HaShoah, this brings a very, for me at least, it's very meaningful that we had, 6 million Jews that were murdered, but we had many Jews that after the war survived the war and stopped being Jewish. And we have today some of these descendants that we have an obligation, and today we can do it, to bring them back, to Jewish life. And that's part of what we did in Poland. And I want to thank you very much. Unless we have a question, we have a minute and a half.
Sure.
Oh, yeah, fascinating. Thank you very much.
I don't have a question. I want to say thank you to you. This is the best explanation of the situation of somebody who was there, and he did not talk about it. He did it. Yeshikov to you.
Thank you.
Ashkar, fascinating.